You were a 24-year-old independent journalist. You had a camera and a list of public spending records, right?
Correct.
So if this fraud was so hard to find, how did you manage to find it when none of the public officials in Minnesota could find it?
I simply went to the locations of the layering centers and the daycares and asked to enroll a child, and there was no way to enroll a child into any of these daycares. In fact, there were no children to be seen anywhere.
So in other words, you asked a few questions and you looked. You actually looked to see if there was fraud.
Yes.
And you found it wide open everywhere, rampant.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
And a lot of the Medicaid programs inside of Minnesota, from the non-emergency vehicles, the transportation company.
Have you ever wondered how an ordinary citizen can uncover something that government officials insist doesn't exist? That's exactly what happened in this Senate hearing. Senator Josh Hawley confronted a journalist whose investigation uncovered massive fraud with nothing more than a camera and public records. What happened next raised serious questions about why those in power failed to act.
Mr. Shirley, I just want to start with you. I, for my part, want to say thank you for the terrific work you've done on exposing fraud all across the country, nowhere more so than in the state of Minnesota. You know, it's a funny thing. Not long ago, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota was sitting right where you're sitting, Keith Ellison. And I had a question or two for him about the fraud in that state. And he said to me that, I mean, nobody could have found it. I mean, he didn't know anything about it. You know, he was completely in the dark until it was all blown open, and there's just nothing that would have tipped him off.
Hawley begins by thanking Mr. Shirley for exposing alleged fraud in Minnesota. He then reminds everyone of a previous hearing where Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison claimed the fraud was extremely difficult to uncover. Hawley is about to challenge that explanation with one simple question.
You were a 24-year-old independent journalist. You had a camera and a list of public spending records, right?
Correct.
So if this fraud was so hard to find, how did you manage to find it when none of the public officials in Minnesota could find it?
I simply went to the locations of the layering centers and the daycares and asked to enroll a child, and there was no way to enroll a child into any of these daycares. In fact, there were no children to be seen anywhere.
Instead of relying on confidential sources or a lengthy investigation, Mr. Shirley explains that he simply visited the locations receiving taxpayer money. What he found immediately caught Hawley's attention because the answer sounded almost too simple.
So in other words, you asked a few questions and you looked. You actually looked to see if there was fraud.
Yes.
And you found it wide open everywhere, rampant.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
And a lot of the Medicaid programs inside of Minnesota, from the non-emergency vehicles, the transportation company.
According to Mr. Shirley, there were no children to enroll at several facilities receiving public funds. Hawley presses further, making the point that all it took was showing up, asking questions, and looking for evidence. If one independent journalist could do that, why couldn't government agencies with far greater resources?
You know, I find it so interesting because Keith Ellison, when he was Attorney General way back in 2018, 2019, I think we've got a poster to this effect, was actually told and had multiple referrals made to his office about fraud in some of the very programs that you looked at. I mean, this is years ago now. He had official referrals made to him. He said, I just couldn't find any evidence of the fraud.
The conversation becomes even more pointed when Hawley references past referrals that had already been sent to the Minnesota Attorney General's office years earlier. If officials had already received warnings, the question shifts from whether they knew to why nothing changed.
Do you think maybe there's a little bit of corruption at the governmental level in the state of Minnesota? I mean, is that just maybe a possibility? Maybe some of these guys are maybe on the take, you think? I mean, possible?
Then comes one of the hearing's strongest exchanges. Hawley asks whether corruption inside government could explain why the alleged fraud continued unchecked. Mr. Shirley doesn't hesitate before giving his answer.
Yeah, it's not even maybe or possibly, it's a certainty.
Hawley follows with a series of allegations involving campaign donations and past investigations. He argues these events help explain why fraud allegedly continued while independent investigators were uncovering evidence in plain sight. The exchange quickly becomes one of the hearing's most intense moments.
Yeah, I would say so too, and I can prove it to you. Keith Ellison, that guy, after overlooking $250 million in fraud, he took $10,000 in campaign contributions from the very people who were committing the fraud, who came to see him in his office, asked him to please get state investigators off of their backs, which he did, asked him to shut down the investigations, which he helped with, offered to give him money, which he accepted. I mean, I think that's the answer as to why can't any of these people find the fraud? Because they're getting paid by the fraudsters. And here you are, 24 years old, got a camera, got the public records, ask a few questions, and it's everywhere to be seen. I mean, this kind of corruption, and it's what, sadly, the Democrat Party wants to bring to this country all across America. I don't know why guys like Ellison are not being prosecuted, I have to tell you. And he sat there and lied under oath right where you're sitting now. I asked him why he took this money. He said, oh, I didn't take a dime. He took $10,000. It's on the record.
As Hawley wraps up this portion, he contrasts the work of Mr. Shirley with the response from public officials. He closes by thanking him for his investigation, before turning his attention to another witness whose undercover work has also attracted national attention.
I just want to commend you for what you've done. Mr. O'Keefe, I want to thank you for being here as well. And I want to thank you particularly for your investigation, so many of them, but particularly those into anti-Christian bias.
Without wasting time, Hawley turns to James O'Keefe. The focus shifts from alleged fraud in Minnesota to investigative journalism, religious expression, and a controversy involving Major League Baseball. Hawley says O'Keefe's reporting uncovered issues that deserved public attention.
You found that Trevor Williams was shut down, he was muffled, he was gagged by his own team because he had the audacity to say that he didn't think that this poster, I think we got a picture of this, that this outrageous desecration of the Last Supper by this group that calls itself the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which is an anti-Christian group that actively mocks Catholics and other Christians. You know, he said he didn't like this, and for that reason, if I remember correctly, the Washington Nationals tried to shut him down. Tell us just about what your investigation found.
Hawley asks O'Keefe to explain what his investigation uncovered. According to Hawley, Williams faced criticism after speaking out about a group he believed was offensive to Christians. Hawley wants the committee to hear what O'Keefe's investigation found.
This is involving the Washington Nationals baseball team and civil rights violations and anti-Christian bias. And the Washington Nationals has fired this vice president for his bias against Christians, and it's part of our expose exposing officials in corporations and in the administrative state, the deep state, breaking the law, pushing back. We have another one coming out inside the Pentagon in the next few days with similar themes.
O'Keefe responds by describing his investigation into alleged anti-Christian bias involving the Washington Nationals organization. He also says another investigation related to the Pentagon is expected to be released soon, hinting that more findings are on the way. Hawley then connects O'Keefe's investigation to a recent Major League Baseball controversy. He asks whether O'Keefe was surprised by reports that players could face consequences for displaying Bible verses during games.
Were you surprised at all, given your investigation of the Trevor Williams incident, were you surprised at all when the commissioner of baseball just a few weeks ago threatened to penalize and fine players, two players on the Giants, who put Bible verses onto one on their cap, I think one on their jersey? The commissioner of baseball came out and said, oh, that's against our rules, we're going to fine you. It was absolutely outrageous. Did that surprise you, given the sort of systemic bias?
O'Keefe says very little surprises him anymore. He argues that recording candid conversations behind closed doors can reveal intentions that aren't always visible in public statements. He adds that citizen journalists can play an important role in bringing those conversations to light.
Nothing surprises me. There's a lot of irony and absurdity in reality, but it does not shock me. And I think sunlight, to quote Brandeis, is the best disinfectant. So they might do some things in open, but I think it's possible to shame the devil by capturing these candid remarks behind closed doors where they really talk about their intent and their motivation. And that video caused a firestorm. And to quote Nick Shirley, the video does not film itself. The citizen journalists should get to show up and do the thing. And I think it's more difficult for bureaucrats to do that. So citizen journalists are going to do it.
As O'Keefe finishes, Hawley points to what happened after the investigation became public. He argues that public attention forced Major League Baseball to clarify its position and respond to growing criticism over the issue.
Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I think partly because of what you exposed, the kind of bias you exposed in the Trevor Williams case, the commissioner of Major League Baseball had to back down.
Yes.
When we confronted him on this issue and admit, actually, the rules permit the players to write these things on their jerseys if they so choose. They permit the players to forego wearing politically themed jerseys at all, and he committed to me in writing that none of these players will ever be fined or disciplined for expressing their faith.
Hawley says the league ultimately confirmed that players would not be fined or disciplined for expressing their faith. He credits the reporting and public scrutiny for bringing about that clarification, suggesting the outcome might have been different without it.
But you and I both know he wouldn't have done that had he not been embarrassed by the facts that you and others brought forward. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
The hearing closes with Hawley thanking O'Keefe for his work before yielding the remainder of his time. Whether viewers agree with every argument or not, the hearing leaves behind a broader debate about accountability, investigative reporting, and the role independent reporting can play in uncovering issues that might otherwise go unnoticed. This hearing covered two major topics: allegations of fraud in Minnesota and questions surrounding religious expression and investigative journalism. Throughout the discussion, Hawley argued that independent reporting helped bring issues into public view, while the witnesses emphasized the value of transparency and accountability. Regardless of where viewers stand, the hearing sparked a conversation that extends well beyond the committee room. If you found this hearing breakdown informative, subscribe for more congressional hearing highlights, key exchanges, and fact-based political analysis.